All right, so you guys all made it. This is impressive. So, all right, so before we start, how many people, you guys are all here, so I'm assuming nobody went to bed after 3 a.m.? All right, after 2 a.m.? After midnight? Okay, a couple after midnight. After 10? All right, they're getting better. Some people actually went to bed on time. I love it. I actually went to bed, you're going to laugh at this, about 8:30, because my wife and daughter flew in last night, so I actually got some sleep. So my name is Michael Holcomb. I'm a senior strategic customer success manager at Tableau. I focus on financial services, and I deal with some of our biggest clients, like think clients with 100,000 users. And so this topic, proficiency, is really top of mind. And what I want to do in this session is I want to empower everyone here with the ability to go back to their organizations and just change it up a bit. I want to leave you with some things that you can think about, that you could say, we can do this. We can do pieces of this. This is an evolution. So let's pick out the pieces that you can walk away with and implement in your organization and start to make a change. That's my goal here today. So we're going to walk through, let me just hide this for a minute. We're going to walk through, we're going to do a little introduction. We're going to play a little bit of a game. I'm going to need your help with a little bit of a game. We're going to talk about the blueprint, and then we're going to dive into the whole analytics track, and then we'll do a wrap up at the end. So a little bit about me first. This is my daughter who flew in last night. Her name is Mika. She's 4. This is her in Poland. My wife is Polish. She actually speaks fluent Polish. I'm not so good at it, so sometimes I have to look at her and say, what did they say? And she's eating a chocolate ice cream cone. We live in New York City. This is the brownstone we live in. It's next to Tompkins Square Park, which if you haven't been to New York, it's a 10.5-acre park in our neighborhood. They have 3 playgrounds. It's awesome. The park actually has a lot of history. It was the beginning of the Hair Music Festival back in the day. It used to be very crime-ridden back in the day. And it also is the birthplace of the Hare Krishna religion in the United States. This was the first place that they actually had a prayer chanting outside of India, and there's a tree in the middle of the park, and if you look way up, like 30 feet up, you'll actually see the plaque that says Hare Krishna tree. Now, my experience, I've worked at a lot of logos on the street. Before I joined Tableau, I worked at Bloomberg. I spent about 10 years there as a strategic financial advisor and as a division CFO. I covered president's office and chairman's offices and all the stuff underneath them. I had a division in DC called BGov. I've been using Tableau for about 12 years now. I've rolled it out internally and I've rolled it out externally. I've probably seen more use cases for Tableau than most people will see in their entire career. So let's play a little bit of a game here. This is called fill in the blank. So if you weren't listening to a certain style of music by age 28, there is a blank % chance you never will. Anyone want to give me a guess? I know it's late, but I need your participation. Someone give me something. Shout it out. 50? 93? That's pretty close. 95% chance. If you're not eating sushi by age 35, there's a 95% chance you never will. How does this relate to what I'm talking about? Because there are a lot of people out there that have been using Excel and PowerPoint for a long time. And it doesn't matter why they have a bias not to move forward. It just matters that they do. Where the brain was more plastic then, people are thinking that's not true anymore. Whether they're, they have a predisposition not to, or they're vested in something else, doesn't really matter. But that's what we're trying to overcome here. We're trying to pull these people along. It's kind of hard though, right? Let's do another one here. Dr. Julia Schvetz did a study with 200 restaurant managers in the UK. These people have data around what they're doing to make decisions. Their compensation is tied to performance. Anyone to give me a guess at what the blank here is? Their ability to project the quintile performance that they fell in. 2. Boy, you're as pessimistic as I am, so. Anybody else? 35%. Now, these people have data. So why aren't they making the right decisions with it? Well, she also found out, it turns out that 47% of them were overconfident. So now we have two problems. We've got people that never want to listen to country. We've got people that have data, and they're not interested, or not interested, they don't know how to use it correctly to make decisions. So let's think about this for a minute. 100,000 years ago, in a community, you didn't eat mushrooms, right? Why? Because somebody in the lineage before that died from eating a mushroom, right? This is how we evolved as a community species. So I don't like to think of ourselves as having individual minds. We have a community mind. And now apply this to your workplace, right? We have community minds. We do these things. Who wants to be the first person that says, no, I ate that mushroom last week? It's kind of hard to do. Are you sure it wasn't an allergy? No, it doesn't go that way, right? So to change a community, you have to do one thing, right? You have to disassociate your mind from that community, or you have to change the mind of the entire community. Well, that's hard, but that's what we're doing. Why are we doing that? Because that gets the people that don't like country into the fold, and that creates a conversation around data for the people that aren't using it correctly. We're talking about change management. We're talking about employing analytics at scale across an institution. All right, many of you might have seen this already because this is kind of prevalent here at Tableau Conference. McKinsey did a study, 1,000 companies, 13 sectors, 12 geographies, over $1 billion in revenue. So it's pretty inclusive. What % of those companies are failing to scale at analytics? This is a test to see if you're listening to the other sessions. 92, thank you. He was listening. 92%, right? Now, collectively, I did a session at Data Leaders where we talked about analytics proficiency, and everybody in the room was doing the right things. If we were one company, we would have been nailing it. But a lot of people are doing good things, but not doing all the right things. So we're going to talk about what those right things are in terms of analytics proficiency. We're also going to talk about what the 8% are doing that nobody else is doing, and that is data democratization. It's also, which is making data available to everybody, also is about making data at the heart of every conversation. So we're not prioritizing based on intuition, which is what the restaurant managers are doing when they're fooling themselves, 47% overconfident. It means we're prioritizing facts over intuition. And we're giving people tools, but we're also giving them the ability to learn how to use those tools in an environment that's safe. And that's important. How do we help these people learn how to use these tools? That's what we're going to talk about today. So we came up with Tableau Blueprint. We just didn't come up with this out of the thin air. I've been talking to a lot of people for a long time now. And so what we came up with is a capability and agility. And that's just rolling out your software and your hardware. And we have a capability and analytics proficiency, right? And that is exactly what it says it is, the ability to use the product. And then we have a capability around community. And this is probably one of the most undersung aspects of this. Why? We're rolling out self-service at scale. And a lot of companies aren't good at doing this. It's a new muscle in their brain that they're trying to flex. It's about building a community. Go back to people that like country music. I do like country music, by the way. Right? It's about changing that entire community. And you only do that by getting people excited, by doing doctor days and lunch and learns and user groups and all these other sorts of things. That's how, as a company, you begin to change everything. And you pull people along and get them excited about it. And you also need a proficiency around governed data sets, right? Now, governance isn't a scary word. I live in New York City, as you know already. I like to think about it as the difference between Line Bike in Seattle and City Bike in New York. Line Bike in Seattle, you can leave it anywhere. You find them in trees and in the lakes and all over the place. Versus New York, where you go to a docking station. Prevents a lot of problems. That's all we're doing with governance, creating curated data sets that people can trust and putting some guardrails in place to keep them out of trouble without being too restrictive. This is our Tableau Blueprint. You usually start over at the left. My left, your left. I can never get that right when I'm on stage. And it's about deciding what the project teams are and what your strategy is. Think of this as discovery. Then you move into deployment, right? So you're going to get the hardware out. You're going to start with some education programs. And they're going to start with your communication strategy. Now, I don't care what your communication strategy is, but you need to have one. at least get an internet site out there and get some things loaded up so people know where to go, how to get help. We can start off with basics. You don't have to do everything all at once. Education is really about deciding how you're going to educate people. The next steps there are about evolving it, right? So you have engagement events. Those are just getting people excited. Those are those lunch and learns. You have measurement, which is user behavior. So how are people using the product? And then what actions you take around that, right? And then at the top, we have the monitoring. Most of us aren't involved in that monitoring unless you're a server admin. And that's understanding about your extracts and all these other pieces that really are important in understanding how your environment's performing. And then you move on to Evolve 2, which is the maintenance. So think load testing, capacity planning, upgrading, what feature people want to use, right? Then you have your best practices, which are really interesting. And we're going to talk about that. And then at the end, you have your support down there. Cargill has 0 support tickets raised on Tableau. 0 support tickets raised on Tableau. If you guys don't know Cargill, it's the largest privately held US company in terms of revenue. That's something to think about. So we're going to talk about the analytics proficiency track. So it starts with designing an education program. We're going to talk about what user engagement is, and I'm actually going to want your help for the user engagement. So I'm going to have to get you all to wake up. I know you all went to bed early, so I'm excited about that. And then we're going to talk about the operational best practices and what that looks like. So education. We have a lot of educational assets out there. Role-based learning, the one in the middle there, we're going to talk about is one of the most exciting things that we've done this year. We have skill belts. We have free resources. We have certification. We have online e-learning. We've got license-based learning. Why do we do this? We're throwing this all out there so you guys can take advantage of it within your own company. This is really kind of important. You have to think about how we're going to create that community. How do we create an environment where people can learn and feel safe about it? So let's start. We have formal training. We've got classroom training. We've got virtual training. I've done both of these, actually, because I wanted to understand what my experience my employees were going through. And they're both equally as good. It just depends on the type of learning that resonates with people. Some people are never going to go to a classroom. You can bring the classroom training in. These are great options if you're trying to jumpstart your analytical program. So you've got a team of 10 or 15 analysts, and you really want to get it off the ground. We've also got online e-learning. It's incredibly cheap. It's $10 a month. I don't know why more people don't take advantage of that. And it comes with 4 different sections in it. Desktop 1, 2, 3, and visual analytics. So it's a great way to jumpstart your program. We also have what I was talking about earlier, the role-based learning. Now this is really, really exciting because now we're actually targeting roles for individuals. When I was doing the data leader sessions earlier this week, that was one of the things that was like most obvious. Everybody thought that onboarding was great, and everybody thought that onboarding could be more powerful if we had role specialization. So I'm a finance guy, and you're going to give me what I need to know as a finance analyst in terms of how to use Tableau, or marketing, or a data scientist, or a community leader, or a server admin. So I'd urge you to check this out. This is a great resource if you don't have a large company, and you're trying to figure out how to educate all your people. This is a great resource if you have a large company and you don't know how to do this. We also have license-based learning. Creator licenses, Explorer licenses, viewer licenses. Why is this important? Well, if you're just starting out and you're not sure about what the roles are and where you're going and what you want to do, this is a great way to get users educated quickly. You know you're going to have people that are creating content. Other people are going to be exploring that content, taking the extracts that you load up to your server and starting to create things with it. And then you've got the viewers, think of your executives that are out there learning what this content is about, trying to make decisions based off it. This is a great way to jumpstart right out of the gate and get moving. And we have a lot of continuing education resources, tons of webinars. Tableau Public is one of the best, right? I steal, like an artist, from Tableau Public all the time. Believe it or not, 12 years using Tableau, I still get writer's block. And I'm like, God, I just don't know what to do today. And I'll go to Tableau Public, and I'll look around, and I'll be like, hey, that looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. And then I can re-engineer it. So if you have access to this, I would urge you to explore this is a resource for you. And then we have special events. TC, obviously a big special event. Everybody's here. We do data days out. We have user groups all over the world. We have events for analysts and for data scientists. It's all on our website. It's all there. We put all this content out there to enable your users to learn how to use Tableau. I want you to use this stuff. We want you to use this stuff. Put links on your internet site. Point people to it. Let's help them out. Let's create that safe environment where they can learn from. And then lastly, last year we rolled out a skill belt kit. And this was our first iteration of how to create pathways for people to learn. It's a kit you can download on from my Tableau Online account. We did a talk about it last year, so you can see what it's about. If you want access to it, I'd be happy to give it to you. A lot of the thinking and what went into that talking sessions was baked into the different role-based learning that we talked about earlier. But this is a great option if you want to go in your own way, and you want to create an Alteryx merit badge or a data merit badge, or you have individual things within your company you want to create, and you can combine it with the role-based learning. You don't have to recreate that data scientist role. You can just point people to that and say, hey, go to this, and we have all these other things that we want you to do here as well. So this is a great way to mix it up. Now we're going to go on to the measurement part. This is where I'm going to ask for your help a little bit. So this is the easy part, right? We all know this. You start with some data. Where's that data come from? Who's using it? How are people using it? And then you move on into the dashboards, right? Think about what's the implications of that? Like, where's that data flowing? How many dashboards is it flowing to? What are people doing with those dashboards? Who's viewing that data? Is it an executive? Is it your actuaries? Is it your analysts? Right? This is all really important stuff. And you can see so forth and so on, and it goes down the way. Right? And you derive this by using the dashboards we have built in, or by using our Postgres. Postgres is it's like the fountain of youth, right? Peel back the layers and understand what people are actually doing. User behavior. And it's about taking action on that user behavior. I was talking to somebody and they said, yeah, we use these and we found there was a whole group of people we forgot to educate. And they knew that because they were looking at the user behavior data around that. You can also think about it in terms of like non-performing dashboards. It's taking 20 seconds to load. Well, you can derive that. So let's talk about it. Views by project, traffic. What could you do with that? Somebody tell me. Nobody? Which are the popular ones? That's right. Someone over here? Exactly, what's not being used. You can see right there, there's a very popular one, and there's ones that aren't being used. So then you want to ask, okay, why aren't they being used? How do we rip that out? Is it an old extract? Was it an earlier version no one's using? Was it just designed poorly? What about views accessed 180 versus 30 days? Same sort of thing as you said, right? How do we rip off the content that's not being used by people? This seems pedantic and pedestrian almost, right? But it's really important. Your analysts aren't going to be thinking about this information. They're just thinking about how they create content. So you can use this information to go then out to the analysts and say, let's talk about why, right? And then the last one, content ownership. Does anyone want to offer a guess on why that's important? That's exactly right. How do we identify power users? And then how do you bring those power users into your community? Can we get them to do a doctor session? Can we get them to help out with another team? There's a lot of actions that you can take downstream by just looking at this. I actually have it in the appendix of this, and this will be published out. I have a ton of checklists. I didn't want to bore you with the checklist. There's like 5 or 6 checklists from site admins and what they should view weekly to content to security. All these different things. You can post them on your cube wall, or if you work from home, on your bedroom wall or your office wall, whatever it is. But it's a great way to remind yourself of the things you should be checking. Okay, what about login frequency? What would you do with login frequency? If I haven't logged in, go ahead. Yeah? No, you're just like stretching.
Just like the last one, I was thinking salaries is also documents, right?
That's exactly right. I might want to take your license away if you haven't logged in 90 days and reallocate that to somebody else that actually really wants to use the product, right? It's a great way to, I don't want to say penalize people, but to a certain degree, day since the last login, the same sort of thing. It also can tell you day since the last login. Think about it, if you're in finance, which is where I came from, right? Maybe I only look at it at the end of the quarter. It's the only time I use my dashboards. So what's the action that I take then? Well, maybe, Mike, how do we improve your workflow? How do you actually start using this during the rest of the month instead of just at the end of the month? Right? So it's about having conversations with these people and understanding subscriptions and alerts. That's a great way to assess how your executive managers are actually using the content, right? Executives don't want to, they don't have to click and log in and go to Tableau. You want to send them alerts and subscriptions so they can look at it that way. So who's actually taking advantage of those alerts and subscriptions? So you can see where we're going with this. It's all about understanding user behavior. And when I say user behavior, I don't mean vanity metrics. Personally, if you tell me you've got 100,000 users on the server, I'm like, that's great, but it's not enough. We really need to understand what people are doing with the underlying data. Now we have some more workbook distribution, view load times, extract performance, subscriptions delivered. What would I do with these? Think about extracts. Why is that important? Exactly. It's all about the backgrounders. Do I need to change my schedule? Are all these extracts actually being used? I mean, this all comes down to the performance of your servers. So these are tips and tricks that you can use to, and that actually will go then into your load planning, right? Because now you're understanding who's using it. Do we need more cores? Do we need more backgrounders, to your point? So it's a really important aspect of analytics proficiency is understanding how, when, where, why, and what's not working with your deployment. Now, a lot of people don't understand that you can actually do performance optimization on the server. I'm going to show you how easy it is in a minute. But a lot of server admins don't turn it on. It's really important to turn it on. And it's this easy to turn it on. It's just a setting. And why is that important? Because if you have a dashboard that's performing on your desktop in 5 seconds and you load it up to the server and it performs in 10 seconds, which no executive is going to sit around to do, by the way. I wouldn't have when I was leading teams. Then you can peel back the layers on what's causing the problem. Is the connection to the database the problem? Is it the calculations? Is it the latency? Is it load on the network? Is it the fact that it's the end of the month and every financial analyst in the firm is now looking at it, and so we need to think about how we plan for capacity for the end of the month? So you can see where I'm going with this. There's a lot of information around how to make your deployment hum in this and how to help your users get the most out of it. Because at the end of the day, users are just going to say, oh, Tableau's slow. They're not going to actually understand. No, this isn't Tableau being slow. This is your dashboard's great, but everybody around you is designing a bunch of junk. You know what I mean? Or we need more cores, or our network's not fast enough, or whatever it is. So this is around figuring out how to make it easy for people to use it. If it's not easy for people to use it, they're not going to use it. All right, so let's talk about best practices for a minute. This is one of my favorites. I could talk about best practices forever. So we're going to talk a little bit about the science of visual analytics. Then we'll talk about that analytics cycle. Then we'll talk about assets. This is going to be fun. All right, so thinking slow, seeing fast. This is one of my favorite slides. I think I had too much fun with this slide. 160,000 years ago in the Serengeti, right? It's sunny. You're looking for food. You're hanging out, right? And a lion appears. If you stop to think about the lion appearing, you're done. Clearly, all our ancestors were astute enough not to be eaten. Well, why is that? It's because if you're using your visual cortex to process information, it's much faster, right? You can see size, color, shape. That immediately goes into your visual cortex. We can take advantage of that. We can take advantage of that in a big way. So it's about visual cortex versus cerebral cortex. And if you don't believe me, this guy Daniel wrote a book about this, and he won the Nobel Prize in economics for it. There's a lot of science around this. And let's just talk about what that science is. It's about pre-attentive attributes, as I said. And we say pre-attentive because it's processed before it goes into your brain. It goes straight to the visual cortex. Size, color, and shape, these are things that you recognize and pop out immediately. And this is really important because executives don't want to have to think about things. If you have a dashboard with a bunch of junk on it and they have to think about it, it taxes them. It wears them out. They're looking at this stuff all day long. We don't want to have to do that. We want to get to insights quickly and easily. So many of you have already seen this. How many 9s are there? Right? Someone's going to tell me. It's 11. But if I do that, it's instantaneous. That's what we're talking about, visual cortex. Text is not a visual cortex, is not a pre-attentive attribute, sorry. There was no letter A chasing you down in the Serengeti, okay? People speak different languages. Those languages are communicated in different ways. Our eyes did not evolve around text. So don't fool yourself. Can anybody tell me which asset is performing the worst? You have to scan the columns. You have to scan the rows. This is superset data, so if any of you know superset data, you're going to go, oh, it's tables, right? But I can highlight it quickly and you go, oh, it's tables. Now I can see it. Now, obviously, coming from finance, if I'm hemorrhaging money in my organization, this doesn't work because everything will be red. But it's much easier to leverage the power of our visual cortex by putting it in a chart and overlaying a couple different things like colors and size and shape. And now you can derive a whole bunch of questions very quickly. You can see what's performing the best. You can see what's performing the worst at the same time. It would have been very hard to do before. And believe me, I've worked with a lot of senior accounting people for a long time, and they all love their crosstabs, and they all think that's the way to go. And sometimes it can be a journey convincing them otherwise. But this really is a much faster way of digesting information. The analytic cycle. It starts with a task, which is really a question. And what I like to tell people is, free yourself to ask questions. I know it sounds crazy, but in the world of data democratization and visual analytics, that's what we're actually trying to get after, is asking lots of questions. And a lot of people aren't used to doing that. It's a new way of thinking. Now, it's important to note, what exercise are you on before you start? If it's a declarative exercise, which is your boss saying, I want revenue year over year for the past 5 years, you should do that in about 30 minutes. It should be crisp and clean and ready to go. Put in the presentation, you're done. If it's an exploratory exercise, well, that's a little different. Now you're actually starting to enter this visual analysis cycle. You're going to, and you want to level set too. Hey, boss, are we going to iterate about this? Are we going to have some meetings about this? Is this going to be an exercise where we participate together to get to an end result? And we're going to ask a bunch of questions. It's always good to understand what exercise you're going on. And then you move into getting the data. When you get the data, I want you to think about how can we make this a repeatable process, something that we can do over and over and over again. You might not do it the first time. It might be just a bunch of Excel stuff or something from business objects, doesn't matter. But then think about how do we make this a repeatable process? And then you want to visually encode it. What do I mean by that? You want to pick the right chart. If it's geographic, then put it on a map. If it's revenue, put it on a bar chart. You got to remember, we as humans like comparing things. Anybody here bought a house? Most people, right? So if you're going to look at a house, and you're going to look at 2 colonials and a ranch, right? The ranch is what's the way to say it? That's the way that they trick you, right? So you see a colonial with a roof that needs fixing, and then you see a colonial that looks good, and then you see a ranch, right? Which colonial is the right one for you? Most people go, oh, the colonial with doesn't need the roof fixing, clearly, right? Why didn't you pick the ranch? You don't pick the ranch because you don't have anything to compare it to. We as humans like to compare things. This is why pie charts are so bad, because it's very hard to compare. This is why bar charts are great. This allows us to make this natural comparison. And so it goes back to picking the appropriate chart for the type of data that you have. And then it goes on to viewing the data. That's pretty simple, right? That's just finding the outliers, starting to understand what this data is trying to tell us. And then you want to share it with somebody. You have an insight. What's the insight? Let's talk about it. Share it with your colleague first. Share it with somebody else. Then share it with your manager. Let's understand what's going on with this data. And then you want to act on it. That's actually putting it out there. Now, that act actually might be another question. It might be, let's go back and look at this again, and then you go through this whole cycle again. And you might go through this cycle a couple times to get to the end of it. But that's okay. That's what we're talking about in terms of visual analytics. Let's explore the idea of an exploratory exercise versus a declarative exercise. Now, I would go back and say, even with a declarative exercise, it might lead to an exploratory exercise. So you should be prepared for that. This is a rotary. How many people live in states with rotaries? I used to live in Ohio. They have a lot of rotaries there. I used to live in D.C. They actually put stoplights in their rotaries, which I never quite understand. It kind of ruins the whole idea of a rotary. Inevitably, when I'm traveling with my wife in Europe, I forget to research the map adequately. You know, in Portugal, you end up in a rotary. I'm wearing glasses. I obviously can't see that well. And we go around and around and around like this until one of us makes a decision. It's usually with me picking a direction that we have to stop and figure out. Usually the conversation's not the best of conversation while that's happening. That's not what we want people to feel like when they're going through our dashboards, right? Why is that? Executives don't like to feel stupid. They're very smart people, and if you put a dashboard in front of them and you think it's obvious, and they are going round and around and around, it's not going to turn out well. They get frustrated because they're like, I'm a smart person. Why can't I understand this frickin' dashboard, right? And if they see 10 of those that day and you're the last person, well, that's unfortunate. It's about clarity, full stop. That's what we want of our dashboard. That's what visual analytics best practices are all about, creating clarity for the end user so they can get that decision very quickly. So let's talk about some of the best practices that you can use. Upper left, most important information goes there, right? And you can get this in a presentation afterwards, so you don't have to take shots of it. Then interactivity for discovery. Filters. Now I warn you, with great power, right? Don't put too many filters there. Why? Because you might know your data really well, but if you have a whole bunch of filters and somebody starts clicking and they get to this end result, they're not going to know where they came from, and they're going to forget. And it's hard to make a decision based off of that, right? It's called a visual interruption. It's one of the things that we do in the whole science of visual analytics presentation. We usually show you like an idyllic picture of a farm, right, in a bucolic setting. And then we'll show a gray box, and then I'll talk for a minute, and then I'll show you the picture, and I'll pull something out of it, and most people can't get it. If you're looking right at that spot, then you usually get it, but that's just by luck. So people can't hold these things in their brain that long, and so that's why you really want to be careful about the filters. No scrolling. Another way to create a visual interruption. People can't remember where you're going with it. Low data ink ratio. Let's make it easy for people to look at the viz and to see the thing that you're trying to show. Consistent colors across the viz. If revenue is green over here, don't make it orange over here. You might want to think about using the colors that are consistent for your organization so that people can quickly understand what's going on in that dashboard. Do you know why it's like the 7 successful habits of the most successful people, or the 7 habits? You know what it is? Because nobody can remember more than a phone digit in their brain at one time, right? It's like 50 things that successful people actually do. But they're boiling it down because you're not going to remember all 50 things. And so that's what we're trying to do here with dashboard best practices. We're not trying to answer every question that data has. We're trying to get at just a few of these questions, and how do we convey these really quickly to people? Let me actually show you proper header and instructions here before I go on. This one's really important. I want to show you a really neat overlay that I saw the other day on Tableau Public. So you clicked on a button, and this overlay appeared and it showed you exactly where to go. Here are your 3 filters, and I thought this was just such a nice way to do it. You got to tell people what to do with your dashboard, because they're not going to understand the data the way that you do. You know what the filters do, but other people don't know what the filters do. And this goes back to, again, why Tableau Public can be such a great resource. So where were we? Common chart types. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. I want to show you some common chart types here. This is from the Financial Chimes chart guide. Right, so the visual vocabulary. Andy Kriebel and his team rebuilt this in Tableau. You can see it on Tableau Public. This is all about what chart to use for the data that you have. And this is really important. I had someone challenge me on this the other day, and they said, well, doesn't this just ruin the idea of creativity? I'm like, no, you should still explore your data and think about new ways to display that data, but let's not do things that people aren't used to seeing. If you look at revenue year over year in a bar chart, let's just don't remake that. Why? Because then it taxes people. If you go from horizontal to vertical, you have to reorient your brain for the new chart. That makes it harder to understand. That's a little bit more taxing. And if you already created a rotary dashboard, you're done with, right? So it's about consistent ways that people are interpreting information. Because at the end of the day, we're in the business world, and we're trying to get to actionable decisions. So we're trying to make it easy for senior people to get to those actionable decisions. We're not trying to show off. I remember the first time I used Tableau, and I had all those colors. Man, I had so many colors that looked like unicorn puke on my dashboards, right? I think that's not what we're trying to do here. 5 or fewer views. I like to challenge people, can you do it in 4? All right? Because you're not trying to overload the people with what you're showing them. Now with Viz and Viz tooltips, you can actually slip a couple more in there, and I'm okay with that because you're not creating a visual interruption. Legends go near their charts. I can't tell you how many times I look at a dashboard and the legends are all over on the right, and I'm like, where do they go to? And even at Tableau, we've had these presentations at our global sales kickoff where they don't even have the legend, but there's colors there, and I'm like, why is that green? Why is that red? And you know what happens? I actually stop looking at the presentation, and I start thinking about what the colors actually mean. And then I realize I'm like 5 minutes in, I'm like, oh, I figured it out. I have no idea what they said, right? So just observe your own behavior when you're looking at dashboards and understand that that's what other people are going through. And then lastly, make use of tooltips. These are so powerful. You can put a hyperlink in there, all this information around a point without changing the dashboard, without moving people away from it. Designing for performance. This is a guide that's out there. It was written by Alan Foding. I can't remember. It's a long guide. I don't want to bore you with all the stuff in there, but it tells you exactly how to design a dashboard performance. Last year, Lovekesh gave a great talk about designing for performance. He's amazing at this stuff. Now, I'm sure they did a session this year. I just didn't know when or where it was, so I pulled this one from TC last year. Go out and look at it. And by the way, put this on your intranet site. I was talking to TD Bank at the Data Leaders Summit, and they gave a fascinating statistic to me. Their concurrent users should be about 500. They've squeezed it out to 750 because they have a promotion process that includes designing for performance. And if your dashboard doesn't perform, they give you advice, and you have to go back and you have to fix it, or they're not going to actually publish it out there. So this has implications not only for you and your work and your neighbors, it also has implications on the number of cores that you need for your environment. Good neighbor syndrome. So it's this easy. Settings, record, do some stuff, and stop, and I'll show you. Let's get rid of this. That's my horrible calendar for this week. So what I'll do is I'll go up here, settings and performance, Start performance recording. I'll open up my dashboard. I'm going to go to a bad design. It's taking a while to load. It's because I put a whole bunch of data in there, right? And then you're going to just click around. Let's get rid of Africa, Canada, high, low, medium, right? You're trying to mimic what would a user actually do with this, right? And then I go, okay, that's enough. That's fun. Stop performance recording. Tableau is going to create a viz for you automatically. 3, 2, 1. And now you can see it took 0.87 seconds to connect to the data source. Well, that's not very good. Clearly, it's pulling in too much data. And I can see computing layout 0.28 seconds. And so opening worksheets, executing query, uncompressing the workbook, and it goes all the way down. This is really powerful. You can then identify what's causing your workbook not to work. A lot of times it's calculations. I see people, they put calculations that go beyond the window and you have to scroll to see them. That undoubtedly has an impact on your workbook performance. We should be designing things that are 5 seconds or less. 5 seconds or less, because people are impatient. And executives are not going to wait around for this stuff. I work with a lot of people on the trading floor. We shoot with 3 seconds and less. This is really important. But this is really easy. You saw how easy that was? You know how many people are actually doing this on a day-to-day basis? Very few. I talk to all of my customers about this. I'm actually with a customer right now. They have 100,000 users, and we're baking this into their process, their education process, on how to squeeze out performance of their servers to make it better for everybody. And if your dashboard is lightning fast and you publish it up to Tableau Online and it doesn't work, then you go to your site admin and you say, I'd like a performance recording because my stuff is rocking and it's not performing online. Can you tell me why? And then they can help you understand whether it's the data source or it's the network or everybody's logging on at that time. They can help you get to the right answer for that. That's why this is so important. So let's go back to our presentation here. Let's move my clock out of the way. Organizational assets. What does organizational assets mean to you? Anybody want to give me an offer? A guess? It's the way. Yeah, exactly. Images, colors, templates, designs. What does your organization use to communicate? If you're working with a small team, maybe the people around your cube or around your office, it's okay to riff and not use the organizational assets. But once it goes beyond your team, now you're communicating with your organization. It's better to put it then, use those colors, those themes, those templates, the way people are communicating. It makes it much easier, again, for managers, senior managers, and executives to look at your work and understand what it is because it all looks very similar. If everybody uses light blue for revenue, we should all use light blue for revenue. And this is really easy to do. We have a lot of articles online about exactly how to do this. And if you think about it, you can publish this on your site. When you're doing a lunch and learn, you can take the first 10 minutes of the lunch and learn, or 5 minutes, and say, hey, everybody, I want to remind you, we have some organizational assets out there you should be using, right? If you have subject matter experts that are onboarding new people, make it a part of that dialogue. If it's an onboarding package, make it a part of that dialogue. If you have a site admin, he should be telling the project leaders, before you publish this stuff, it should conform to the way our organization wants to communicate. It just makes it easier on people, right? A great way to do this is a Viz Design workshop. This is actually from Tableau. It walks you through to how to do a whole Viz Design workshop, and you can include organizational assets as part of that. And this goes back into that whole community track about doing activities, engagement activities that are really fun. So you can see a lot of these different subway stops on that map start to blend over into one another, right? So you can use that to communicate. You can have fun at the same time as well communicating. A biz design workshop is a great way to communicate best practices. Show people how to do a performance recording. Talk to them about colors. Tell them to stop using pie charts. I thought you guys would laugh at that one, but a couple smiles. So let's review this for a minute. Where do we start? We started back with the blueprint. We started around analytics best practices. We started with the education aspect. And this is about understanding the roles within your organization, what people need to do to get their job done, what those roles look like. If you're not ready for roles, then you want to do license-based learning. You want to provide something out there for people to access. So you want to put this stuff on your community site. You want to create an environment that feels like a nice learning environment where everybody can go to understand these resources. So we're talking about how to educate people. We're talking about taking the people that don't like country music and bringing them along. We're talking about the people that are making bad decisions based on data and creating an environment where the whole room is talking about what they're looking at the dashboard. We're talking about providing education to help to change the mind of the entire community and bring them along with us. And then we're going to use community-based activities like lunch and learns and doctor sessions and user groups and onboarding to push that out there to get everybody on the same page. And then you'll find that once people are all talking in the same language about how to do this, the performance of your dashboards is going to get better. The performance of your server is going to get better. And then we're talking about user measurement beyond vanity metrics, right? I don't care about how many active users and users you have. I care about, are you actually looking at what people are doing? Are you pulling out those licenses if they're not using them? Are you getting rid of content that's not performing? Are there groups that actually aren't using it because they weren't trained properly? Are there extracts that are failing? Are there too many extracts? Are people using extracts from Excel? We've got to stop that, right? We want to make repeatable processes for people to use. Are people embedding credentials, right? It's about peeling back the layers of that Postgres database to understand how people are actually behaving and then taking actionable decisions based on that to make things better. And that's the key part about that. Don't just do it and do nothing. View it and then act on that. And then lastly, it's the organizational assets. So this is the visual best practices. This is the performance best practices. This is organizational templates. This is organizational colors. This is about communicating in the same language across the organization. It's not meant to stifle creativity. Teams can still do what they need to do. Or maybe you have a playground, often called as a sandbox. That's fine. But once you start communicating upwards, you really want to get people thinking about consistent communication throughout that process. That also involves the analytical cycle, helping people understand what they should be doing, how they should be doing it, what kind of exercise we're on. So I didn't show you this at the beginning because I didn't know if I was going to run long or not. There was a session a couple days ago by JP Morgan Chase on implementing their skill belt program. I think it's really interesting. I recommend you watching it. It'll be recorded. They talked about how they rolled it out. They've had 1,500 people go through their skill belt program. They've created a common language across the organization for skills. Jedi Padawan, Jedi Knight, Jedi Master, Jedi Grandmaster. I know it sounds funny, right? But I actually designed the program for them, and I had beginner 1, 2, and 3, and they were like, well, that's not very much fun. I said, everybody at Tableau conference, we're all data nerds. Everybody loves Star Wars. Could you do that? I was like, sure, that's fine. But it's been tremendously successful for them. So it's a way for them to onboard new users and teach these analytical skills and push it out across the organization. Another one that could be good, designing a corporate standard. Is that past the time? Yeah, I guess this was for yesterday when you could have attended this one. This is another good one. I'm sure they'll record it as well. Around how to create these organizational assets, where you put those organizational assets, and how that can impact your analytics proficiency across the organization. This is when it was supposed to repeat. We're repeating it now. And then lastly, please, please do put in your survey results. We do look at that stuff. If you didn't like this session, we'll figure out how to make it better. If you like that session, then it's good for us to know. If it was kind of okay, then we're going to go back and rethink about it. This was the last day of the conference, though, the very last session. Thank you guys for coming. I'm really excited that you guys showed up. It's awesome. Woohoo!